Well, thank you everyone for being here. We're so excited to see you all. And, we just love in-person events because digital is great, social media is amazing to learn new information, but real change happens at events like this where you take a group of curious, like-minded people and put us all together, and I think that's where momentum really builds. So if you don't know us, I'm Brett Ender. I'm joined here with my co-host Harrison Gray, and we run the Meat Mafia podcast, which is a local Austin-based podcast really focused on fixing the food system. And through the 300 episodes that we've done, we've really found that learning about regenerative agriculture, how our food is made, how we can actually support these local ranchers with our hard-earned dollars, that's just such an amazing way to ultimately fix the food system and reclaim our metabolic health as well. So we have 4 amazing panelists that we've actually interviewed multiple times on our podcast that are doing the hard work of getting their hands dirty in the soil, raising super nutrient-dense foods, and I think it's going to be an amazing conversation. So could our panelists come out on stage as well?
All right, and while we're waiting for them, Brett and I, we started this podcast 2.5 years ago, and one of our favorite memories of the podcast was actually going on a road trip from Austin to DC. And during that road trip, we stopped at 5 farms, and by the end of it, we really had this conclusion that we had grown disconnected to our food system. So today, we've invited up some of our closest friends, some of our podcast guests. So as a starter, would love for you guys to introduce yourselves, and then if you could, as short as possible, we're going to dig into this more, but what do you guys think has gone wrong with the food system? As short as you can.
In the introduction?
In the intro.
My name is Ann Warren. Weldon and I own Holy Cow Beef. And what's gone wrong with the food system? Additives. We're deconstructing food. And we're deconstructing the soil. So that's my short answer.
My name is Weldon Warren, married to Ann Warren, Holy Cow Beef. What has gone wrong with the food system is we've taken God out of the equation.
My name is Charles Mayfield. I'm the founder of Farrow Skincare and Mayfield Pastures. I would say there's just too many people between the consumer and the farmer today at large, and I know we'll dig into that a little bit more later.
And I'm Michael Kummer. I'm the founder of MK Supplements, and we started homesteading because we realized that the food in the store sucks, and we need to take control of our own, food supply. And so we'll talk more about that, I guess, here on the panel today.
That's perfect. We're so excited to have the 4 of you on here. These are 4 guests that Harry and I have both personally learned so much from, so we're so excited to have the 4 of you up here. So when we started the show, it really started because Harry and I felt like there was a different gear and level of health and energy that we ultimately wanted to tap into. And so what we noticed was when we started eating more single ingredient foods, animal products, fruits, vegetables, etc., our health absolutely skyrocketed. And a lot of it was contrary to what traditional doctors were telling us. So we eat these foods, we start to feel really good, and then the more research that we're doing, we find out that 85% of all the meat in the conventional grocery store is controlled by 4 large corporate packers. And I think a lot of people don't know the kind of quiet monopolization that's happened in our food system. So the 4 of you, could you kind of give your take on what is the difference between regenerative practices versus conventional practices, and why is it so important for someone in the audience to find a local rancher to connect with?
Well, I'll answer the question about regenerative regarding animals. The feedlots are going to accelerate the timeline to get an animal finished, and they're finishing on corn and soy. And regenerative, they're going to be in the pasture, they're going to be eating grass, absorbing sun, vitamin D, and just back to nature. And that's the difference between regenerative farming and the modern day food processing. You want to add to that?
So when animals are left on pasture and they're eating pasture, they're eating grass, they're eating something green, that means that what they're depositing on is very fertile. But when they are in a feedlot, they're either depositing on cement, because a lot of times it's just cement where they are, or their deposit is very toxic. And so when those toxins go back into the earth, you've lost your regenerative feel for the soil. And so a lot of regenerative ranchers and farmers will talk so much about the importance of the soil and its life-giving properties. And so what you really want, you can tell we're pretty seasoned, we've earned this color here, but what you want is, back in our day when we were kids and we would go into the backyard and we would play, we would hold worms. You want your grass and your ground to have living organisms in them. But with all the glyphosate and the synthetic fertilizers, everything that goes into that soil, especially the glyphosate, which is a chelator, that binds up stuff, you no longer can have a soil that's living or life-giving. And so that's why regenerative farming and ranching is imperative to not just our food system, but to our very nourishment, to our lives.
The deepest soils on the planet were built through natural systems of grazing herbivores followed by birds. And if you want to talk about the greatest threat to our food system outside of probably the government, it is the fact that our topsoil is eroding at a rate that is unfathomable. And if we run out of topsoil, the game's up. And so I would say that in line with what Ann and Weldon said, regenerative farming works in a natural system. We can accelerate it really fast, which is kind of cool, but it's to build soil. And so in the industrial system, a lot of these things, the added costs are externalized. We turn manure, arguably the most valuable organic matter on the planet, we turn it into toxic sludge in the industrial system because it's concentrated. And so the externalized costs, the government funding, everything goes towards the industrial system, which is, I know we're going to get into local farmers later, but I think we have to start building soil instead of depleting it.
Yeah, and the only thing I can add to this is, conventional farming, very much tries to trick nature to do better than nature. And if there is one thing we have learned over the years, that it ain't gonna work. Nature knows, it's been millions of years that certain things have happened. The way animals, live in the wild, the water circles, the carbon circles, all of those things are very fine-tuned, work very well if we just stay out or do it with, or, following those circles. If we try to trick it by growing something quicker and fatter and, synthetic fertilizer and all of those things, it might work for a segment of the production chain for a while, but ultimately, it's like a cart house, and it's going to come down, and we see it has already come down if we just look at the health, not only of the food system, but also of society.
Now, all of you guys have your different stories of getting into ranching and into farming. Why did you guys not decide to go down the conventional path? What made you guys go this regenerative model?
Well, I had a stroke. So that led me to go back to the farm where we were raising our own cattle, eating the product that we were raising, and it turned my health around very quickly from having, very serious blockage in my carotids and all 6 arteries of the heart to after roughly 5 years of eating grass-fed, grass-finished beef, chicken, all the different animal proteins, had our own garden, so we were growing that garden. I had 0 plaque in the carotids and the 6 arteries of the heart.
I just got really into food, and I got invited to cook at an event at Polyface Farms. I'll talk about this tomorrow, but if you haven't been to Polyface or White Oak or some of these, scaled, highly regenerative, high integrity farms, it doesn't take long there to want to try to recreate that at a scale that's appropriate for you. So that was my gateway drug.
Yeah, we realized, as I said before, that the food we can buy doesn't really meet our specifications in terms of how animals are raised, the nutritional content of the food. And so we figured, well, we don't want to get into farming in the sense of selling the product, but we want to farm enough so we have food to eat and we know exactly where the animal came from, how it was raised, how we see the soil. I mean, when we bought the current property, it was like a Bermuda, lawn, culture basically, and now it's a jungle, and seeing that transformation, even though the next owners will hate us for it, is just beautiful, and so that's what inspired us to grow our own food.
That's so well said. And to your point, there were kind of three statistics that Harry and I had heard early into doing the podcast that blew our minds. Is that number one, 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So essentially 9 out of 10 Americans that are walking around today are not healthy. 63% of all U.S. calories consumed in this country are in the form of ultra-processed foods. And then the last one that was mind-blowing was that 99% of Americans have never actually met their rancher or their farmer before. And so my question to that is, why do you think that is in regards to not meeting a local farmer? And then what's the actual answer to solve for that? How do we educate ourselves and meet our ranchers? Or what are some practical things that you'd all recommend for the audience?
There's a website called Eat Wild. I think they've done one of the better jobs of curating local farms, and they're not all necessarily regenerative, and they're not all woo-woo, or there's a litany of farms on there, but there is a power, Brett, in shaking a farmer's hand, and so I think that's a tremendous resource for everyone. So that's my contribution.
It's still education. Conferences like this, talking to your butcher behind, if you do buy your proteins at a grocery store, talking to that butcher. When we first started our business, we worked millions of farmer markets and had a woman come up and talking to about our product, and all of a sudden she went, "Wait, what? You kill the cow?" And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." And she goes, "Never mind, I'll go buy it at the grocery store." I kid you not. It's like, that's part of that 99% that really don't understand where food comes from. And we've got to get that back, and we've got to do it with our children. We've got to instill our children to understand that it's okay that these animals were actually put here on earth for our consumption, and that was God's ultimate plan, because that is how we survive. So anyways, I think it's just education.
I'm going to say something about homesteading, so I'm going to dovetail for him in that over the last 40 years or so, we've had people move from the farm to the city, become much more urbanized and dependent on the grocery stores to deliver our calories to us. And now in the last few years, we've seen this resurgence of people moving back to the country and beginning to homestead. And we take a call a day probably where people are asking, how do we start homesteading? And so for all of you that are of that mindset, I would encourage you to do that. Get back out into the country where you can have your feet in the dirt, so you're absorbing vitamin D through the sand and through the dirt and in the sun, and growing your own fruits and vegetables, raising your own animals, processing those animals, take control of your own food supply.
Yeah, the only thing I can add to this is, in addition to people not knowing where food comes from, most, as you said, don't want to know. They cannot fathom the fact that, there was a rabbit now and tomorrow it's in your freezer, And I think getting comfortable with the fact that, as you said, that animals were put on this planet, for us and for other animals to consume, but they have a certain role, and being okay with that role, or accepting that, that animal has a role, and, we love that animal from day one, but at some point, it's going to have a bad day. Only one day, hopefully, right?
One bad day.
And also the other thing that I've noticed with a lot of the YouTube content that we put out on our homesteading channel, people don't understand how you can love an animal and then kill it. And I'm like, how can you not love an animal, before killing it, And that's a whole foreign concept for a lot of people, unfortunately.
I just want to remind everyone here that you are all descendants of farmers. Every single one of you. 100 years ago, there was not a grocery store in the United States of America. 80 years ago, everyone had a victory garden to win the war. in Europe. And so if you have your doubts, there's great resources, out there, both virtually and in book format. You start with your own little victory garden. Start there. But you have it in your blood and in your soul, I assure you.
Yeah, you guys are bringing up a really good point about the disconnection that we have with our food system. It's really deeper to the whole premise around life and death. And Michael, you brought this up. And I'm really just curious, all of you guys have raised kids on your farms. And oftentimes I think there's so much value in viewing the world through kids' eyes. So how have you guys sort of explained that relationship and almost given them an advanced course in life, getting them to get close to the process in this way?
Well, for us, so my background actually was I was born and raised in a city. And so when I married Weldon and we moved out to the country, a lot of people would say, so were you raised in country? Because that's Weldon's background. And I was like, well, the country club, and he was like, well, will you take the club out of me? So anyways, but I wouldn't change a thing. Our kids got to get their hands in the dirt. We're exposed to outside all the time, showing animals through 4-H. It's a great organization for kids. And I loved that. And I'll tell you now, as a grandparent, we have 4 little grandchildren, and one's just a baby. So, but the 3 older ones, the littlest of the 3, when she was 1 or 2, as soon as she could walk, she was outside all the time, outside with her hands in the dirt, usually just with a diaper on, honestly. But the other 2 were inside on their tablets. And it was that littlest one that was the healthiest by far. I mean, the other 2 always had gloppy noses. They were always sick. We were always like, get them off the tablet, get them outside. But just get your kids outside. Get them where their vitamin D is coming in through their eyes. Don't put sunglasses on. Don't put sunscreen on. Let them get the sun. The healthier you eat, the more the sun is your friend. When your body is out of balance, the sun's going to burn you. But so just being outside and really getting your hands in the dirt, like you said, we are all farmers, that is just so healthy.
If we fill this stage with every leadership, business development, biohacking book, and distilled all the lessons that are ultimately optimal for children to learn. Farming, especially regenerative farming, incorporates and encompasses every single possible lesson you would ever want a child to learn. And, chickens are small, pigs start small, and so, it's a great hard work, empathy, feed the animals. That's a common term. I forget who wrote the leadership book. It talks about FTA, feed the animals. Whether it's raining or snowing, hot or cold, responsibility every single day. And so my youngest 2 are 9 and 11 now. If you come to my talk tomorrow, you'll see some early videos of them. I think it's the greatest gift you can give a child is to get them reacquainted with their food and the outdoors.
Amen.
Yeah.
I'm done. Mic drop.
Well, we don't come from a farming background. We're all city boys and city girls. And when our first chicken got killed by a hawk, we all cried. Because we were not used to, well, first of all, something in our care died. It wasn't really, because of us or for something we were doing or not doing. But the kids learned really quickly that this is how it works. If you want to have food on the table in the evening, we gotta take that life and, but we're gonna, care about that animal up until the very last day. And especially our daughter, who is, very animal loving, much like she got that from me. But she also had a difficult time in the beginning, but figured out really quickly that this is okay. This is how it's supposed to be, and this is the best for the animal. We take very good care of them, and we take very good care of ourselves by then eating that animal at the end of the day. And they've come, to terms with that, and they are thriving in that environment. And it's one of the things that I wish we would have done sooner, started sooner. Grow something, grow something, right? Get involved, and your kids are gonna be I guess, on a way different level and ahead of everyone else in this world, in society, and as far as, making this planet, a better place for future generations.
So speaking of the planet being better and better, when you have your grandkids or your kids out in the garden and helping you on the farm or on the ranch, realize that every green blade of grass and anything green in your garden is producing oxygen for you all to breathe. When you're grazing your cattle, they are doing carbon sequestration for you and your environment and the world as a whole. These animals sequester carbon, and we're all worried about global warming, but one family farm at a time can sequester carbon with their animals and grow or produce more oxygen, for the population around them.
I'm not worried about global warming.
Good for you. Neither am I. But Biden and Obama and them, they are.
Well said, both of you. So when we go back and think about the question of what's gone wrong in the food system, with a bunch of the episodes that we've done, the conclusion that Harry and I have formed is just this intense demonization and scapegoating of red meat. I feel like we almost ostracize red meat as the root cause of heart disease, cardiovascular issues, overweight, obesity, et cetera. The statistics that we found is that not only are we not eating too much meat, the average American is only eating 2 ounces of red meat a day. And there's also this concept of C40 cities that are popping up. So there are literally cities in the United States whose goal is to reduce carbon emissions by as much as possible by 2040, and the goal is to bring red meat consumption down to zero. So my question to you is, why do you think red meat is demonized? And what is your reaction to this intense propaganda against red meat when all of us can confidently say that the incorporation of animal products has really restored all of our health here and probably a lot of audience members as well too?
You can't trademark or patent beef. And if you look at the core of the plant-based, even the carbon climate movement, it's all around control and intellectual property. You can charge for that, you can protect that legally. You cannot patent beef. And so at the end of the day, it's money. Poor health feeds the pharmaceutical system. It feeds the medical system, feeding the mental health system. And so I think that is what ultimately sits at the core. And I will say one of the silver linings of the last 3 years of chaos, 4 years of chaos that we've all collectively lived through is I think the curtain got pulled back a little bit on that. And, systems have tipping points. Malcolm Gladwell's written a bunch about this. And I truly feel like we're at an absolute tipping point metabolically in this country. And so that's why you're all here. And, don't give them that control.
Well
I'm actually
said.
a fan of...
Charles keeps getting clapped for right before you speak.
I'm actually a fan of that whole anti-meat agenda because all of the idiots following it are going to die sooner, and it means fewer idiots on this planet. So,
Woo!
I was going to say, these cities, I was like, go live in that city if you want to. Have at it, friend.
Are you guys at all concerned about regulation when it comes to what you can and can't eat?
yes, and one of the reasons why we grow our own food, so, and having plenty of guns, that takes care of that.
Yes, but this country was founded by a few. That's who you are. You're the few. Vote with your dollars. Shake your farmer's hand. Keep that money. When you write a check to Whole Foods, that money's out the door. But yeah, I'm very concerned about it. But I also like to try to ignore it and stay local. Don't let your concerns get global or even national when it comes to your food. Bring it back local.
And in Weldon, probably the most impactful thing that you've taught Harry and I in the time that we've gotten to know each other is this concept of the good, better, best model. And I think it's such practical knowledge for people in the audience. Would you be able to dig into what that actually is and how the audience can incorporate that? Because there's so much information on social media, there's so much competing information that I think it's tough for people to kind of make that first step where they almost let perfection get in the way of just starting in the right direction. So yeah, I would love to learn more about the good, better, best model for the audience.
For this panel and for this, the good is to eat meat. I mean, it is good to eat meat. It is better to eat locally because you're going to get all the bee pollen and all the local things that will help you with any kind of allergies. It is better to eat animals that are local at a smaller ranch because they are usually better handled, so the animal welfare is better. It is better if they are pastured and grain finished. It is better that they have access to pasture because the feedlots, they generally don't have access to pasture, or it's very, very tiny. And so that's a better solution. And of course, the best is to eat off of a regenerative farm where they are grass finished. And why do I say that? Because I am a grass finished beef producer. I say that because that's where you're going to find the most Paleolithic results in the beef that you're eating. You're going to see those omega-3s and omega-6s in the proper balance, and that is the key to health. And so you'll hear other panelists get up here and talk about there's really not that much difference, because once you switch off of processed food and go to a carnivore-based diet or a meat-heavy diet, Weldon and I are not carnivores. We have access to the most highest quality beef and high quality chicken and high quality pork, grass finished pork, which is really an anomaly, but we're not carnivores. We still eat other food, and it's very high quality other food. But when you have access to that, and your health reflects it, so good, better, best. Good to eat meat. Better to eat local, pasture, grain-finished beef, organic grain if you can get that. And best, of course, is the grass-finished beef. You'll see like 1 omega-3 to about 3 or 4 omega-6s, and that's about the right balance you want for Paleolithic health.
That was fantastic. And just to piggyback off that a little bit, I'd be curious to get all of your guys' takes on nutrient density. You guys talked a lot about the benefits of starting to farm for yourself and avoiding a lot of the downsides of coming into contact with chemicals like glyphosate and atrazine, things like that. But what are some of the benefits of actually eating an animal that's fully healthy? Like, do you actually believe that there's a difference in the nutrient quality that you guys are getting?
Between industrial versus regenerative, or just?
Regenerative versus conventional.
I think there is a difference, and it doesn't get talked about enough, but again, the costs to the ecology are externalized in the industrial model. And again, folks, we run out of topsoil, the jig is up, like we're done. And so I think that needs to factor into it. I mean, nutrient density, but also ecological density, that's a component. But there's no question that animals raised in an environment where is their natural environment, and eating the foods, cows don't naturally eat grain. And so, if you look at the industrial model, it's the sickest, unhealthiest animals. And do you want to eat a sick animal? It's a better choice than Cheerios. It's a better choice than Doritos. This is, I like to add bad.
Pretty controversial.
So there's bad, good, better, best. Stay away from bad. Go to Walmart for your beef. Start there, but know that we would rather you transition to a more nutrient dense, less industrialized product.
There's just a ton of scientific research. Eatwild.com, great resource, not only to find a local rancher near you, but to find that nutritional difference between eating grass-finished or grain-finished beef, if you're talking specifically about beef. But even to the animal, I don't know if y'all know, like the typical feedlot model is that an animal will go into the feedlot for 90 days at the minimum, 180 days at the maximum. Why is there a maximum? Why don't we continue to get them fatter and fatter and bigger? That means a bigger tomahawk ribeye, right? Because they die. That's why. Because they die because they're not meant to eat that grain. And so if you're eating grocery store beef that has come from a feedlot, then you're eating an animal that's ill. And so you need to be aware of that. And so it's still better to eat that than Doritos. It's still better, but it's not the best. And so eating an animal that comes straight off grass the way God intended it to be is the best. And so that's the real answer there.
Every consumer should be required to roll down their window and spend about 30 minutes in the neighborhood of a feedlot and smell the odor off of that feedlot, and you'll know why you don't want to eat grain-finished beef. They're all on their way to death over some period of time. And so all these colleges, it didn't take them too long to figure out that they couldn't keep animals in a feedlot, forever. They're all going to die. So they have to figure out how long can we keep them, how many pounds can we get them to gain, and then still sell them to the supermarket so we can sell our beef. And it is a much faster way for an animal to gain weight. If you keep them out on the pasture, it's a good average just to say they're going to gain a pound a day. In a feedlot, they will gain 5 times, so 5 pounds a day in that model. So it makes them more money to feed grain, but they're all on their way to death. And so that is not a long-term solution for us.
I know we're running short on time, but
No, we've still got a little bit of time.
but I wanted to say that it's maybe also important to consider the type of animal. I think that monogastric animals are probably much more affected by conventional farming practices than maybe ruminants, right? So I'd rather buy meat from Walmart or from Costco than buying a chicken, well, from anywhere really, because we don't buy chicken. So monogastric animals, they literally are what they eat, much like humans. And so if you feed them grains, if you feed them an inappropriate diet that reflects in their fatty acid composition, in their protein, in the case of the Cornish cross chicken, I mean, that's a chicken breed that shouldn't even exist, Nobody should be eating Cornish cross as far as I'm concerned. Damaged proteins, poor fatty acid composition, it's much worse eating that than, for example, conventionally raised beef, as far as I'm concerned.
That's a great point. I tell people store-bought chicken and pork, which are the two primary omnivores in our food system. Store-bought pork and chicken might as well be a completely different thing than pasture-raised, regeneratively farmed omnivores. So that's a great point, Michael.
So we are going to ask one more question, and then we have about 10 minutes for audience Q&A. So if anyone has any questions for our amazing panelists, you can just line up right by the mic right there, and then we'll start taking some questions. But before we do that, my last question for all of you, so you've covered so much amazing information up here. What are like the 1 to 2 big takeaways that you have for the audience of things that they can start doing literally this week to kind of take autonomy and control over their health, their life, their food supply?
We are American Grass-Fed Association certified. If you go on their website, you can do just like eatwild.com. You can put in your state, and they'll find a local rancher of all different kind of proteins that fit their model. Eatwild.com is another one. And so if you don't know where to go to try to find somebody who will locally produce protein for you, those are 2 great websites to hit up. So I think that's the best thing, is to try to find someone local.
Ditto.
I would add to that. I got two. I would add if you have access to a local farmers market, that's also a great place to just go and shake hands. And if you have kids, get them there with you and take a farm trip. I would also add, if you're looking to monetarily put something into the system, personally, the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund is that they'll take your $20 tomorrow. I think the memberships may be $50. But this is an organization that will represent small farmers when the bureaucracy of food safety and everything else, and we didn't get to dive deep into that. But that's a real part of the problem in this country, is just the overreaching of our government entities when it comes to food safety. They represent, Amos Miller famously, he's been raided twice now, and a number of different farmers. But Farm to Consumer will step in and legally represent these local farmers when the bureaucrats come knocking.
Yeah, nobody cares about y'all's health. Don't outsource, food to someone else who does not care about how healthy you are, how healthy the animals are. Take control, be involved in the supply chain at, somewhere. Be it meeting the farmer, knowing where the food comes from, growing it yourself in the best case scenario, but do something to be involved. Just leaving it up to someone else is a recipe for poor health.
Go for it.
Listen to the Meat Mafia podcast.
Let's go. We didn't even need to pay him to do that. All right, now we'll open it up for questions from you guys, so ask away.
Hi, my name's Martha Carlin. I have a question and two comments. So my question is, what are your thoughts on the new regulation that Congress just passed on digital ID for cattle? And how do we turn that back?
What are your comments?
Well, they basically just passed a law that's going to require digital ID tags on all the cattle in the country.
Okay.
Which is a means of figuring out who's got food to feed themselves and changing the regulations so that small farms cannot afford to operate. And if you don't tag your cows, there's a fine.
Yeah, it's a climate change thing. It concerns me a little bit, but this is why, again, you got to stay local. I equate that type of government overreach to the Second Amendment kind of thing. They talk about taking away our guns all the time.
Like go to the state.
And it ain't going to happen. And so, we may have to live in a world of a year or two of them trying to implement something like that. But
We're not going to do it.
I'm confident that the consumer and the rancher in this country will stand up and vote.
I think you're also going to see more private memberships pop up. We're in the process of, we keep going back and forth. Are we going to, are we not going to? But I think that's a way for us to keep the government at bay from our membership, from us helping feed other people. If you're a member of our private membership, then you're giving me permission to raise the animal according to our standards, yours and mine, and we don't need them to tell us how to do that.
My comment to we're taking God out of the food. So I learned from Joel Salatin that grass is 95% light. In the beginning was the light. I am the light and the way. And then don't go by a feedlot and smell the air. There's two problems with that. Ammonia is a signaling molecule for microbe colony formation, and it'll change your microbiome. And the air and the dust that flies off of the ground in those feedlots, there's a Texas Monthly article about this. It spreads antibiotic resistance genes in the air that you're breathing in, so don't do that.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Hello there. First of all, you guys are incredible stewards of the ground. Thank you for everything that you do. And I totally, my heart hurt what you said, because I don't know what it is that makes us so against the soil, but we need to live. So my name is Janae Williams, and I am Optimama on Instagram. My motto is get out of the grocery store. I'm an advocate for regenerative family farms. I'm with the CSA in Raleigh, North Carolina, that is only regenerative and have been for the last 10 years. We have great ground in North Carolina. I have worked with a number of regenerative farmers, which is a handful.
Janine, what's your question? There's people behind you, and we got limited time.
My question, so there's a handful of them before 2020. Right now we have polyphase, we have white oaks, great. My CSA is getting food from polyphase when we used to have a number of regenerative farmers. These family farmers were doing great work, but all decided to throw in the towel. What I know is that we can't afford for a small regenerative family farm to throw in the towel because we need the soil. So what is going on? To the lady's point that was just here, I want to know, what are your greatest challenges with all of this government overreach and all of the guidelines? Because I've seen 5 farms give up, and now in North Carolina with the gray ground, we get our meat from Polyface. What's happening, and how can we make that change?
It's not the government. It's you. We need more people buying it. I mean, it's more expensive to do this. How many times you hear your beef costs more? And, you know, there's 5 farms that have folded. Farming's hard. You know, we've externalized farming. Again, we're all descendants from farming. I'm talking about this in my talk tomorrow. The number of farms in Oklahoma has gone down by a factor of 1,000% since 1920. So,
I know there are people behind me, but I can tell you that the farmers that I worked with, they had too many people, and they were running out of stuff, but they gave up. They gave up. They moved away. Some have moved back to Virginia. We got nothing in North Carolina. That's why my question is here for you. What is going on? Because it worries me, because we don't have stewards of the ground in North Carolina. It's very few.
I think we need, in America, to reevaluate your family budget. And we need to look at Europe, because the quantity of their family budget that they spend on quality food far outweighs ours. Not just a little bit, not just by 10%.
It's double.
It far outweighs that. And in fact, Charles and I were talking about right now selling your cattle to the sale barn. That's a place where you can small people can sell. The prices are insane. They're so high right now, which is really good for the smaller ranchers, but it's also hard for people to get those animals and get them back into the food system, because the smaller ranchers should keep their animals in the food system. But the problem with us right now, and I always coach people, why do you buy brand new clothes that cost so much and spend so little on your food? Why don't you buy used clothes and spend more on your food? You've got to allow us to put our prices that'll keep us in business. So those ranchers that have gone out of business, even though they sold out of their product, they probably couldn't raise their prices enough without pushback from the consumer. And therein lies the problem. I mean, it's with us right now, our prices need to be higher, and we can't. We're scared to death. We're going to lose that market, you know. And so in my humble opinion, that's what Charles was saying. It's the consumer needs to keep us in business.
It's a great question. That's you can't answer that one in an hour-long talk. It's just, but yeah, eat wild, and I agree. You shouldn't be a Polyface customer. You know, you should.
I should be able to go local.
Yeah, so go to Eat Wild and find somebody, and maybe you jump in you don't need but a couple acres to raise a bunch of food. He's proof. So.
Yeah.
All right, we've got time for one more question.
Can you just speak to labeling real quick and what grass-fed means on the label?
Oh, that is such a Pandora's box on labeling. The USDA is not trustworthy. There's not a 3-letter agency in the government that is trustworthy. So common sense is the best thing to think about on labeling, but you'd hope that a grass finish label would mean that the producer really did finish them on grass. You hope that. If it's anything that is just a regular beef label on there, it is not grass finished, it's not pasture finished, and it's not even worth you really spending your money. There's a doctor who will talk tomorrow. Eric Berg.
Eric Berg, yeah.
He will tell you that grass finished is worth every penny.
So in 2016, the Obama administration actually rescinded a label that Weldon was chosen along with some other executives from Whole Foods and White Oak Pastures and Polyface Farms. Those guys all got together and decided what grass-fed meant on a label. But in 2016, and you can come by my booth, I actually have the paperwork that's got a big stamped withdrawn on it. That was withdrawn because they felt that, and this is the almighty dollars talking, they felt that all cattle eat grass. Therefore, all cattle can be labeled grass-fed. And so getting that extra, you'll always hear us now say grass-finished, because that's really what the grass-fed label should mean, but it doesn't mean that anymore. And so you really want to find somebody who's American grass-fed certified, or someone who, if you're shaking their hands and you know that they take those animals right off the grass and butcher them, that's what you're looking for. And so that's what's happened to the label, is it's just what we were talking about, government overreach. They make it difficult on the average consumer to understand what they're purchasing. And when you're purchasing something that you think and you're willing to pay higher dollars and you're not getting the health benefits, you're more than likely going to grab that bag of Doritos and say it's not worth it. But if you've talked to people like Brett and you hear his health journey, you're going to find out that eating clean is so worth it. It is so, so worth it.
Well said. And I'm sorry for anyone that didn't have time to get a question asked. Our amazing panelists are going to be around all weekend too. So if you have some questions or you think about stuff throughout the weekend, please go up and approach them. They'd love to help. They're incredibly informative, amazing people. But thank you all so much. We love doing panels like this. This is really what gives us hope, where a lot of these macro level issues are scary. There's a lot of conflicting information out there, but I would just encourage you all, just keep it simple. Find good people like this to buy food from. Opt for single ingredient real foods. Cook the 90% of your meals and do that over a long period of time, and your health is going to absolutely transform. So thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.
Let's give it up for the panelists.